Welcome to another episode of Wild and Well. Today I'm talking to certified financial counselor, author of Everything But Money, and the host of the More Money podcast, Jessica Moorhouse. We're talking all about financial health, including how we can shift unhelpful beliefs we might hold about money, small steps so we can take to improve our financial health, and even how we can raise kids to have a healthier relationship with money. So, welcome, Jessica. I'm excited for this conversation. But before we get into all of that, can you tell us one thing that you've done today to take care of you?
I don't know if I've done anything yet. It's only noon, so we still have some time. Gosh, you know what though? Honestly, I'd say that the thing that I did do well today is I got enough sleep. So actually, I have a tendency, which is really bad, to go to bed late. But then over the weekend, probably just because it was kind of the long weekend and it was much more relaxing, I started going to bed earlier, getting up earlier. So I feel really refreshed. So I got enough sleep. How's that?
Sleep is one of the key strategies for
Okay,
self-care, right? So
good.
it starts your day off well. It starts the night before, right? So that's a great one. Can you share a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do? Because you're doing a number of different things.
Yeah, I mean, overall, my kind of role, my job, even though I have a lot of different hats that I wear, has to do with money and financial literacy. And I've always wanted to have some sort of career that was focused on helping people, and I couldn't figure out what that actually looked like in reality. And so I went to university thinking that, I loved being creative. I loved writing. I loved being, creating art. And so I went to film school with the intention of being a filmmaker. And then I finished school back in 2009, which is ages ago now, and realized actually that's not my passion. I thought it was, and it really wasn't. And so it wasn't until maybe a few years later, I was working just a regular kind of job at a newspaper, and was trying to figure out what is my passion. And I stumbled upon the world of personal finance blogs back in like the kind of mid 2000s. And I thought, what a cool thing that people are sharing this information so publicly. Some of them were anonymous bloggers, but they would share their numbers, their net worth numbers, their debt numbers, how much they're earning. And no one ever talked about money like that. And I thought it was so fascinating, especially as someone like me who I've always been very conscious of money. It was always something that we didn't have enough of, and we had to be very careful. And I also, had to pay my way through school and had to have a second job, and I always had to figure out how that worked. But I was kind of just using my mom's template, which was great in certain respects. I knew how to budget, I knew how to be frugal. I didn't know much beyond that. And so when I was introduced to this world of people talking about money, I'm like, well, this is really interesting. Maybe I'll just do this on the side for fun as a little hobby. And I did that on the side, working a full-time job for about 5 years until I realized, why am I not doing this? This is the thing that I get excited to finish work so I could do that thing. Maybe that should be the thing that I do every day. And it did feel that kind of gap of helping people. Not only was I sharing my journey, at a certain point, I kind of shifted because I felt like I shared enough about myself is not very exciting. I want to explore, other people's money and let them feel connected and learn what they don't know. And so in 2017, I left my last job. I used to work in corporate marketing, and took a big risk. And now, I'm almost 9 years in of doing this full time. And what that looks like on a kind of practical, level is I have a podcast I've had for 10 years now. And so that really was the thing that kickstarted things. I think I had a blog, but I never felt like that was really kind of my true calling. The podcast was super exciting, because I got to talk to people and smarter people and all these experts about things that I didn't know, and share it with the world. And then, started a YouTube channel. Then I started doing media. So I'm for the past decade, if not more, I've been an expert on, CTV, CBC, all those kinds of shows. And gosh, what else do I do? That's it. I kept on adding things. And so every year, even though there's a lot of the things I do the same, sometimes, years look different. And so for the past 2.5 years, I've been working on my first book, Everything That Money, that just came out. And that was a really cool experience. And yeah, just honestly, always just trying to find new avenues and do different things, whether that's live events or speaking or whatever it is, to get the message out on that no matter what your circumstances are or where you started from, this is all learnable stuff and you can take control of your financial situation. So you don't have to, repeat the cycle of your parents or your grandparents. You can absolutely end up where you want to end up. Here's what you need to know.
I just actually finished reading your book yesterday and I really enjoyed it. And it's interesting, like as a psychologist, I found it really interesting that as somebody who's a money expert went
Oh,
into
yeah.
all the
I
psychology
know.
and the trauma and all those things. So it makes so much sense, but it isn't necessarily what you expect from a financial
No.
expert. Given the
No.
title, it gives some
Yeah,
clues.
yeah. Lots of people, I get that. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I finished the book," and I thought it was maybe gonna be more on the financial side if they kind of knew me from that world. And now I get why you named it Everything But Money, because the book really is about, even though I've been in this world talking about the practical how-to stuff, the thing that it kept on rearing its head is that it isn't just about money. It's about more than money. It's actually about everything but money. Money really isn't the thing that's in your way to getting money, which may sound counterintuitive, but it's the truth. It's all these internal and some external barriers that are maybe making it harder for you to get ahead compared to your peers. And it's not an even playing field. There's a lot of people out there that have a, head start oh yeah, start on fourth base, or third base. How many bases are in baseball? Um, and so I really want to explore all these different aspects because, again, having a podcast over 10 years, I've read a lot of books, talked to a lot of other financial authors. I came to a point where I'm like, I can't read another damn personal finance book. I've read them all. They all pretty much say the same thing, maybe through a different lens or a different voice, but they're all pretty much saying the same thing, like the practical how-to books, right? And so I knew, sure, I could go that route, but it would be interesting to explore something that most people don't talk about, which is the why instead of just the how. Why do most people not have an emergency fund? Why are most people in debt? Why there's all these stats out there that you can look that is kind of crazy to see how many people, the US, Canada, are struggling financially. Why is that? And sometimes it's not what you think it is. Sometimes it's not for a lack of financial literacy. It's not for a lack of income. And it's not for a lack of maybe opportunity, but they're still getting into debt. They're still spending everything that they earn. They're, you know, 5 years later, still in the same place financially. Why is that? And so I wanted to share to people, this is maybe why, you've listened to all the podcasts, you've read all the personal finance books, you feel like you're doing the research and you're doing the work, but you can't figure out why it's not working for you. And like one common thing I hear from people is budgets don't work. I hate budgets. And you're like, well, budgets actually aren't the problem. It's there's something else under there because a budget is simply a structure for how to figure out what's the best way to allocate your income. Like that's all it is. So of course budgets work. There's a reason businesses have to use them. There's a reason that once you figure out a structure that works for you, it really does change everything. So why is there's this group of people out there, they're talking about, no, budgets just don't work or they don't work for me. It's like, okay, if that is how you feel, let's explore that. Let's figure out why is that? Because at the end of the day, again, it is just a plan for how we move your money around and put it in places that will benefit you. So why is it harder for you than say someone else who's like, oh, budgets are easy. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the why is so important. Like how is important too, but if there
Yeah.
is all the how out there, we need to sometimes dig deeper, whether it's finances or other aspects of our lives, and figure out why we're coming up against blocks or we're resistant to something. So
Hmm.
speaking of that, what are some of the common invisible barriers that women specifically hold when it comes to finances? Like what holds women
Hmm.
back?
So, yeah, there's a big part in the book talking about the invisible barriers that affect, people of color, women, if you have a disability. There's so many different categories that I wish I could talk about that I didn't even make them into the book because I just didn't have the space. It was going to be a long, long book. But I really wanted to have a section of the book talking specifically to women because when I started learning about personal finance in my 20s, all the books were written by men. There's hardly any women in the space. And so a lot of the information was through this very male lens. And again, I would try to do some of the advice that they put in their books that they said in the media, and it just wasn't working for me, such as, negotiating your salary. I'm like, well, I tried and I didn't get a raise, or I got a raise, but it wasn't what I asked for. It was still less. So why is that? And that's not for a lack of effort or I didn't do what that book said. I did it and it didn't work for me. Why is that? Well, it's because sexism still exists in the workplace. There's still a lot of biases. There's unconscious bias, there's conscious bias that only now we're talking about, but certainly we were not talking about that when I was in the workplace. I feel like the overwhelming kind of theme when I was in my 20s is that we'd already broken the glass ceiling. There was hardly any sexism in the workplace. You're fine, so it must be your fault. You're not doing something. And I internalized that for a long time until I reached my 30s and kept on like, there was a good span of 7 or 8 years I worked in different corporations and was always, had these experiences of like, no matter what I do, why can't I earn more? And then there's so and so next to me, this guy who was less experienced, less education than me, is worse at their job, and they got a raise. What's going on? Maybe it's because there's a lot of these invisible barriers that no one wants to talk about, or they say, oh no, that's not true. Maybe he did something right. I'm like, did I do something wrong? And so there's so many things that exist that are probably holding you back that are almost impossible to, it's hard to prove. There's hard, because it's, again, it's invisible. Same thing with, I talk about a lot about in the book, people of color. There's a lot of internal racism in different companies. Very hard to prove, especially those kind of microaggressions that can have a real impact on you as an employee. Very hard to be like, well, this is happening. Well, it's not that big of a deal, or you're exaggerating and things like that. And so I really want to explore that so people can be like, oh my gosh, that happened to me too. I always thought it was a me problem, my fault, but really it could have been your employer that was doing this. And again, it's hard to find the solutions to these really big issues. But, for me, how I was able to get out of that was to leave those employers that were stagnating my income and making it hard for me to build wealth. And I became self-employed, where yeah, there's a lot of barriers, there's lots of difficulties in that respect, but then I'm also fully in control of what I can do and how far I can go. And I know a lot of people, a lot of women, a lot of people of color, they find that is the solution for them as well. As once I became self-employed, I had a lot more freedom and a lot more opportunity and a lot more, I guess, kind of mileage. I can, grow as much as I want. Whereas if I'm with a particular employer that has these biases or this, sexism or racism, they are going to cap me at a certain point, and I can't do anything to go beyond that.
Yeah, it's interesting that that leads a lot of people into being entrepreneurs. It wasn't something that I had previously thought about until I read that in your book.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what about unspoken money beliefs from our childhood? A lot of
Mm.
us carry these. I say unspoken, but they're probably often unconscious, whether it's
Yeah.
scarcity or guilt around spending or tying our self-worth to our income.
Hmm.
What do you find some common money narratives are that you see in women or even in mothers if you notice like a trend
Hmm.
in that area? And how do we begin to identify these and rewrite them?
So yeah, the a big component of the book is really understanding where do we come from? Where are we starting from? Because that's the only way. We have to dig into our past to understand how we can kind of break things down, rebuild for the future. And again, too many of these, how-to personal finance books are very focused on like what you need to do now to move forward. But it's like you can't move forward if you don't know your past. You just can't. You're going to be repeating the cycles. You're going to be leaning into old behaviors and you don't know why and you don't know how to stop. And so you really need to understand your past. And so part of the book, I talk about these money stories, these money narratives that are, again, automatic, unconscious. We bring them with us into adulthood, have no idea we're doing that. And we're doing the best that we can based off of, our parents' blueprint or our family's blueprint. And again, it's funny because then you look at your parents, you're like, well, they were just doing the best they can, but they didn't have like a formal education in finance. So why am I following their blueprint? Because they may not actually know everything you need to know about money. But, again, they did the best that they can. I'm taking that. I'm going to do the best I can. How can we break this cycle though? How can we, not live in scarcity? How can we not just be afraid of investing? That's a big one that I see with people that especially grew up low income because there was never any extra money to invest. It was all about survival. Or, just even just the fear of, I think, learning something new. A big barrier for people, especially women, is saying that they're just not capable of learning this stuff, that, oh, it's too complex. Whereas, you can learn how to do all these other really incredible things, but money or investing is like, oh, sorry, that's beyond me. And again, that's because, that the financial industry and math and science and those types of things were always kind of categorized as, well, this is for men because predominantly men were in those fields. But as someone who always wanted to kind of go against the grain and didn't like being told no, like, well, I'm going to learn this. I mean, that's part of the reason I went to film school. Very male dominated. I was one of 5 women in my class it was a very small class. We were about 30 or 35, and not all of them, finished the program. And so it was very clear. I'm like, oh, I'm one of the few women in this industry. And when you get into the actual industry, it is mainly men. So I've always been someone who's like, well, I want to see how hard it is, or is it harder for me because I'm a woman? Surprise, surprise, it's not. It's actually not that hard. Now I love knowing so much more and I've done a lot more traditional training to become a financial planner, that I can call people out and be like, actually, no, wow, that's just like some overly confident guy who actually doesn't know what he's talking about. And I think we need to just, yeah, really understand what is going on and what is true and untrue. And for women, we are actually incredible with money. A lot of us are the money managers in our families and have been generationally. So we may not have always been the earners, but we were always the money managers, making sure that we can have enough for the groceries and pay the bills and everything like that. And there's also stats to show that we're actually really good investors. We're better than men because we're less emotional, which is really funny because the narrative is always that women are too emotional. I'm like, no, we just know how to process and emote, whereas men don't. And so it doesn't mean that we're more or less emotional. We're actually less emotional people than men. And so when it comes to investing, there's lots of stats that show that, men get very emotional when looking at stocks. And so they'll buy when they shouldn't be buying, or selling when they shouldn't be selling, and end up with an overall lower return than a woman who just has conviction, has a plan, and sticks to it, and doesn't do all this trading that they don't need to do. And so learning a little bit more about, actually, women are very smart, very capable, really good at money. We need to get rid of this narrative that, well, that's not, women, like the stereotypes that I feel like I grew up with is women overspend, you give them money, they're going to blow it. They love to go shopping, all this kind of stuff. And those are just stereotypes that really aren't based in the modern reality that we live. And we need to break those down and get rid of them because they're untrue. And so really understanding what are some of the internal beliefs and stories you've been telling yourself up until now about you and your relationship with money. Write them down and take a good look to be like, is this true? Or I can't believe I wrote that down. That's so not me. I don't believe that, but it came out of me. So I guess I did believe that. So we need to really understand, yeah, where it came from. And how I kind of break it down in the book as well is, let's really start at the beginning. Let's start with your first money memory when you were a child and go from there to see, did that one event that you can still recall. And I've talked to so many people over the past year who've read my book, and they're like, oh, I know exactly my first money memory. Like, it's in there, it's ready to come out. And really identifying that, because that probably laid the foundation for you and your relationship with money up until now. And that may reveal a lot about where you're at right now financially.
Yeah, I think that's a really good process to go through. And it is interesting when you write down beliefs, whether they're about money and finances or about motherhood or about
Hmm.
anything, reflecting on that and looking at it and saying, is this mine? Like you were
Yeah,
saying there, it's surprising that that
not
even came
mine.
out of me. But often we do just internalize what our parents have done, what media or
Yeah.
society has indirectly or directly told us. And
Hmm.
it's really nice to recognize those beliefs explicitly by
Yeah.
writing them down. And then it's a lot easier to let them go that way because sometimes you're like, I don't
You're like, oh
actually
my
even
gosh, I
believe
can't
that.
believe that's, yeah, yeah. And like you said, we have so many things that we're carrying that are not ours. And so
Hmm.
a big part of the book, I also talk about trauma, and also specifically generational trauma. And that was really interesting to dive into because it also forced me to look at my own family history and generational trauma that I didn't think I was carrying. But I was, and it started to make a lot more sense about how I am with money, how my mom is, how my grandpa was, and on and on and on. Is we need to understand, what are we carrying from our ancestors that is not serving us, but we are still carrying because we don't even know we have this load on our backs. Because again, it's invisible, or no one talked about it. And so we're not even conscious that we're doing it. And until you do that work, you're going to, unfortunately, if you have children, give it to your kids, and they're going to give it to their kids, and onwards and onwards. And so we really do need to, I mean, I think you probably enjoyed this. Like the main premise of the book is everyone needs therapy. Everyone should go see a therapist, because it really is, I think, the secret ingredient to reaching the financial heights that you want. And until you, yeah, really understand yourself better, there's no way you can move forward, um, and consistently be on a different path without setbacks, without going back to the old ways.
So speaking of like what we pass on to our kids, how do we help our kids to form a healthy relationship with
Mm.
money and not pass those unhelpful money beliefs on?
Yeah.
Like you're saying, like doing all this work that we're already talking
Yeah.
about is so key, but is there anything further that we can do?
Well, it's ultimately you need to fix yourself before you can set a good precedent and foundation for your kids. Because a lot of how you're going to teach your kids about money isn't you verbally teaching them. Kids learn by observation. They learn by, the conversations they hear that you don't know that they're listening to. They're very observant, and they're sponges, and they absorb everything. And so you need to do the work on yourself, so then you can start taking action and implementing the things that you've learned with your new tools, so they can then learn those and be like, okay, this is what I saw my mom do. And so, I always think back to my parents. They try not never to really talk about money in front of us, but it was a small house, so we all knew what was going on. And my mom never gave me lectures about how to budget or how to be frugal. It was just in the day to day, oh no, we can't afford that. Oh, so it was just little things that I picked up. And so you do have to be really conscious about how you also talk about money. And I think a lot of people think about, oh, like bank accounts or credit card. No, it's just like it's spending money. It's like, saving money. It's the paying your bills. It's the everyday things. And really being conscious of what kind of language you're using. Are you using a negative form of language or one that's more positive? And the goal really is you want to set your kids up rather, to believe that money is not good or bad. It's a tool that you have access to and can get access to if you don't have it. It's not something that, I think, in the past, largely probably because it was true, there were limitations on how much you can earn, because it just, there were systems in place that made it really hard for you to get out of poverty. Now the field is a lot more level. It's still not completely fair at all, but it's still possible. And so there's a lot more possibilities and opportunities than I think there ever have been in history. Um, but you need to really make sure that your kids believe that this is something that you can learn. This is something that you can control. It shouldn't control you. And, you have authority over it. And also you have authority over your financial future. And so really being cognizant of, yeah, what kind of things you share, what kind of things that you say, making sure that they feel like, oh, yeah, I can do that. Instead of, I talk about in the book, I grew up in a household where it was very much, no, we can't afford that. And that was the end of the conversation. Instead of, we can't afford that now, but let's see what the options are for affording it later. That would be such a more, hopeful conversation, because it's not saying no and shutting the door. It's saying not right now, but maybe later, which means, okay, well, let's see what we can do. How can we afford that? And looking at your options. And so I think really kind of practicing that. And again, that all comes back to, you need to know how you're talking about money, how you feel about money, what's coming across, because sometimes things will slip out. Then you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just said that. Or I can't believe I just, revealed that. That's not how I want to come across when it comes to money to my kids.
I think it comes across in all aspects of parenthood that
Yeah.
we have to do the work ourselves before we can really show up for our kids or help them to have helpful stories around any aspect of their lives, including
Yeah.
money. So yeah,
Yeah.
that
No, I've
makes so much
been
sense.
watching lately, me and my husband watching a lot of the show Couples Therapy. We just discovered it, and it's so funny because even though it's about relationships, I'm like, this is applicable to every area of life, and especially with money, everything kind of comes back to your past. And if you're bringing your past with you into adulthood and expecting to be in a different situation than, like, say, your parents, like, why would you expect something different? You're literally just repeating things, and until you really process things, you're going to be in the exact same spot and ask why.
So, for a woman who is feeling overwhelmed or behind financially, what's a small step that she can do to start like building confidence and creating a healthier relationship with money? Is it just going back and looking at those things, or is there anything else that we can do?
On more of a practical level, I think one thing, if you're like, just give me something to do right now that's like simple, that will make me feel maybe a little bit better than where I'm at now. And one thing I find is most people have actually no idea what's going on with their finances. They don't actually have the hard numbers. They have an idea, they make some guesses, and then they probably color it with some worry and some anxiety. So they probably think they're in a worse spot than they actually are. Um, and so I always tell people when I work with a financial counseling client for the first time, okay, we need to know the numbers. We need to know your net worth. What are your assets? What's in your bank accounts, your investment accounts? What kind of assets do you have? If you have a house, have some equity in there. And then what are your debts? And then let's take a look at everything so we can kind of, sit back and take a big wide angle view on what is actually your situation. And more times than not, they're in a better position that they're always like, oh, that's not as bad as I thought. I'm like, exactly, because we catastrophize, we blow it up, we make it bigger than it really is. But then also, once you have those numbers, it's a little bit easier to see, okay, what are the problem areas or what are the things that we should focus on to, again, make us feel like we're a little bit safer. So often it could be like, oh, we have no investments, we don't have that much cash, but we have a lot of debt. That makes me really anxious. I'm like, okay, so let's get some more cash in the bank account because I think that's causing you a lot of stress because if there's an emergency, if something happens, you lose your job, well, we're just going to get into more debt because we don't have any cash. So let's focus on something that's going to make you feel good that we're going to work towards. And then once we hit that milestone, we can focus on some other things that will continue to make you feel safer. And that could look like, okay, I want to start, investing for retirement. That could look like, I've just had a few kids and I still don't have a will. And that really makes me anxious because what's going to happen to them or life insurance. There's all these elements of a financial plan that as you slowly kind of chip away at your priorities, once you have all of those elements together, then you're going to feel a lot better about what's going on. And you're going to probably be okay that maybe things are going to be a bit slower or work slower than, you want. Everyone always wants like, what's a quick solution? There aren't any. Sorry. There's no such thing as a quick solution unless you get an inheritance one day. But even then, if you don't have the good foundation, then you're going to spend that inheritance and it's going to be gone and then you're going to be in the same spot. So really just taking your time to better understand where is the money and what are some of the issues that we really want to address. And then while you're doing that, also really focusing on the personal relationship with the money. Let me try that again. And then also really focusing on your personal relationship with money. And again, I always tell people I love, tracking your net worth every month, tracking your spending every month. That's how you know what's really going on month to month with your money. And your spending can reveal a lot. It can show you how emotional you were that month or what happened that month to maybe cause you to go over budget or to not save as much as you wanted. The information is there. Oh, my money went there. That's why I'm not further ahead this month than last month. Well, now that I know that, I can make a more concerted effort to not replicate that this following month. So, really kind of keeping yourself accountable with your numbers. And again, doing that work on your relationship with money, understanding your past, kind of starting to write what you'd like your story to be moving forward, and just taking those kind of baby steps because it's not something that it will take time. It will take time. But if you make it like a goal, being like, this is the year that I'm going to make these changes, and it is going to be baby steps. Again, like 10 years will go by, a year will go by, but you'll be in a better situation. And so I think you've got to be comfortable with being patient because no one likes being it's hard to do, but you've got to be. And that's really the only that's kind of my philosophy when it comes to money. It's get rich slow, take things day by day, and then everything will slowly compound and you will eventually be in a spot that's much better.
And you mentioned there thinking about what story you want with money moving into your future. Where do people start with that? Is that looking
Mhm.
at what your story has been and those beliefs and then working on changing those? Like, can you give us some insight there?
I mean, I kind of like doing let's see where we're at right now, and then kind of setting that aside and writing, this is where I'd like to be. What is my dream kind of life? And it doesn't, and when I say that, I'm like, in reality, saying, oh, I'd like a yacht one day. That may not be realistic depending on your career. But really, like, what would make you satisfied and happy now in the next 10 years, next 20 years? And you can even break it down into kind of life stages. So maybe you're at the life stage where you're married, your kids, there's a lot going on, there's a lot of responsibility. But if you want it to be less stressful and, just a little bit more full of joy and happiness, what does that look like? And just again, don't think about what's going on right now. Just ideally, what would that look like? And then you could be like, well, once the kids are out of the house, what does that life look like? And then when we're retired, what does that look like? So just write stream of consciousness what you would like life to look like. And it can include money, it could not. It could just be like, this is what I want. And then we can kind of fill in, well, in order to reach that, then we need this kind of component financially. And then once you have kind of like, this is what I'd like life to look like, and this is what life currently looks like, do a kind of side by side comparison to see what are the gaps. Maybe we are kind of on the road and we didn't realize, oh, we're actually doing something to get there. That's great. Or maybe they're complete opposites. So we need to see how can we, you know, really compare them to see what's working, what's not working. What do we need to throw out? Because again, we're carrying a lot of stuff with us. What can we set aside? What can we throw out? And, kind of say this isn't serving me, so we're gonna set that down and just leave it there. What are things that we need to start integrating? Maybe there's things that we're not doing and we need to start, and hopefully the things that you're letting go will leave that space that you can add on to. And then slowly you'll be able to kind of create a picture, a roadmap for how can we, from where we're starting, get to where we want to go.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So when we think about letting go of, say, those stories and those beliefs that we carry from our childhood when it comes to money, becoming aware of them is really important. Understanding where they came from, understanding if we want them or if they're somebody else's. What happens after that? Like, do you find that after people become really aware and start shifting their belief and determining what they want to believe instead around money? Do you find that's enough? Or do you find that they have to keep coming back to that over and over to chip away at it?
Yeah, unfortunately, you have to keep on coming back to it. There's no cure. Just like anything in life, I always kind of give the comparison of like, if you want to be more healthy and fit and, like your body more, well, we know the things that we need to do. We need to work out, we need to eat better, we need to take care of our bodies. But if you just, get to the pinnacle, like, oh my gosh, I finally have abs and I lost the amount of weight that makes me feel great. If you just stop doing what you're doing that you need to do to reach that point, you're gonna, regress. You're not gonna be able to stay there. And that's the same thing with money. It's an muscle you have to continue to exercise. And so there's yeah, things that you're gonna have to continuously do to kind of keep on top of it. But also in terms of like more like the psychological aspect, there's going to be moments where you're triggered or you'll get into a behavior pattern that you thought you'd worked through and wouldn't affect you anymore. Now, here you are again doing the same thing. And there's so many reasons for that, who we're hanging out with. For example, if you have maybe a complicated relationship with money and your family, and maybe you don't live with your family or near your family anymore, but you're visiting for the holidays, you might get back into certain kind of roles and behaviors because of who you're surrounding yourself with. And it may have a big impact. Like, if they talk about money in a negative way, you might find yourself talking about money in a negative way again. And you're like, why am I doing that? Because of who you're surrounding yourself with and who the bubble is. And so you have to always kind of be aware and be able to know when you're like, oh, ooh, I feel like we're going down the path again, and I don't want to do that. And so you always have to kind of check in with yourself and really understand that. And I say that as someone who has not only written this book and done the work myself, but throughout the past, since the book has been out, these things affect me as well. I still am affected by like, oh, what the financial news headlines say. Like, well, remember, this is making you feel a certain way, and typically you would do this, but we need to do this, and we need to just again really check in with ourselves and make sure that we're not regressing, not falling back into, bad habits. And it's hard, especially the things that are really deep rooted, especially like that family history, that family, generational trauma. It's so deep in your bones. It's hard to not, get those flare-ups. I talk about in the book how I grew up with a big scarcity mentality that my mom grew up with, my grandpa grew up with, all these other people in my family grew up with. And so it's generational. It's hard to stop. You'd be like, well, I'm stopping that in its tracks now without it ever flaring up, when the headlines are saying recession, everything's, crap, everything's going down. It's going to be, worse than the Great Depression or, it's the end of the world, all that kind of stuff. It's hard not to be like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, wait. We know where this comes from because I'm pretty sure not everyone reacts or feels the same way I do if they see the same headline. And so I need to understand my part in that and to know, okay, how should I react? Because we know when it comes to managing your money properly, you have to be a contrarian, unfortunately, and ignore some of those deep-rooted instincts to say flee. If you see the stock market going down, our natural instinct is to sell. And we actually need to do the opposite, which is buy more or just to do nothing, which is really difficult. And so we have to, yeah, continuously practice at it. So ultimately that muscle will get strong and then it will feel less like work. It will be like, oh yeah, it will just be kind of automatic. It'll be kind of in there. Just like I'd say like the one example is not that I'm very good at dance, but I do remember taking dance, and it's the hardest thing to learn a new routine. But then you practice and practice and practice, and then there's a time where you're doing it. It's this muscle memory. You're not even thinking that you're doing it, but you're doing it. And so I do believe that the more practice you do and work on yourself, eventually it will kind of feel more like muscle memory, and it won't be as much effort to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like going to the gym and, you know,
Yeah,
working your biceps. It might be
exactly.
hard the first day, but you can add on weight and it gets easier.
Yeah. And you're like, I can't believe I can lift this much. How did that happen?
Hmm.
Exactly. It just gets easier with practice.
Yeah, you start moving your body or using your mind in those ways that you don't even think about. It's
Mm-hmm.
habitual.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get in touch with what those intergenerational beliefs are? Like, I understand how we can see it from our parents and sometimes from our grandparents, but what if people don't have access to too much of their family? Is it something
Yeah.
that you just notice comes up in yourself and you assume that it might come from your family? Or are there any
Mm.
tips you have for people?
Yeah, it's a lot easier when you have the records or the people to talk to really kind of understand that. And I know for a lot of people, like if you're adopted or if you have a really complex family history, that may not be possible. Things are a little bit easier, I would say now with like all of those DNA kind of websites where you can see who you're connected to and you can kind of maybe find some family members that you didn't do. That's kind of one interesting aspect. But and also, yeah, now there is lots of ways where you can find those records, whether they're public or there's kind of organizations that help you kind of find out your family history if you've, been disconnected. That's helpful, but if that's just not possible, then it is really just, yeah, maybe understanding you and some of these things that you have and you can't explain. And yeah, maybe it is about kind of making some assertions that, okay, it's weird because I don't feel like I should have this scarcity mindset when, I'm always afraid of losing my job. I don't know why, because maybe, I'm adopted, the family I grew up in, there was none of that. So why am I the only one in the family that has these fears? And then so you could, ultimately make an assumption that maybe this does have something to do with me biologically. And I can't explain it, can't prove it, but that could be one, um, assumption that I can make. And so that might be helpful, but ultimately, yeah, the easiest way to kind of really kind of make confirmation on some of these things is trying to find some sort of family member, even if it's, a cousin or a cousin of a cousin or something like that. It's so funny, me talking to some of my family members. I've got, my core family, my parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. But then I've also got, I've become pretty good friends with, and I'm like, what exactly is she to me? She is my, um, I call her my cousin, but and she actually helped me with my book a little bit, which is great. But she is like my mom's cousin's daughter. She's our grandmas are sisters. So who know? I don't know what that is in the connection, but we did not grow up together. She's from Quebec. I'm from British Columbia. And it was only when we were teenagers we did a bit of an exchange. I was in French immersion. So she came here to kind of, improve her English. I went over there to improve my French. her English is way better than my French today. And it was so wild just to see, even though we weren't, you know, yeah, like first cousins, the similarities and how some of our internal things. And, I talked to her a lot while I was writing the book, and she had some of the same exact things that I had when it came to money. And it's funny because we'd never talked about it. Again, we didn't grow up together. We don't know each other super, super, super well, like growing up together. And it's so funny that, wow, I can't believe you've got that too. Okay, great. So it's so fascinating when you do have that, I guess, kind of privilege of being able to connect with family to see, yeah, that's where that comes from. That makes a lot of sense.
And if you have family to talk to, like this example with your cousin, do you explicitly ask them? Is that what you recommend people do? Like ask your parents and ask your grandparents? Or is it just about like noticing how they talk about money or
I mean,
both?
yeah, no, that's great. I would say at first notice and observe and kind of see, because again, you can get so much information just from observation of what they're saying and how they're saying it. But if you did actually want to outright kind of ask and find a little bit more details, I mean, I obviously did that, and I had the excuse of I'm writing a book about this, so I'm doing research. But very well, you could also use my book, being like, I'm reading this book and it's about this. It's kind of an interesting topic. What do you think? Using it as, again, an excuse to, start the conversation. Again, it depends on, your relationships with people and whether they're comfortable talking about this or not. Honestly, most people actually are more comfortable than you give them credit for. Again, especially if they're not maybe talking directly about them, but they're talking about something else. They may not be comfortable telling you about their financial situation or their deep rooted fears and anxieties about money, but they may be more comfortable talking about an aunt that you both share or your great grandfather that you both share or something like that.
And what do you recommend for women or mothers who are dabbling in the idea of starting their own business or starting a
Mm,
podcast or a blog? Like you went through this.
yeah.
And there's a lot of people in my audience that are moving in that direction and a lot aren't. But for the ones that are like thinking about it, what would you tell them or what would you tell your younger self going through
Mm.
this now that you're 10 plus years in?
Gosh, yeah. There's so I've been doing this full time. In January. It'll be 9 years, and and then I started as a kind of a side hustle, maybe 4 or 5 years before that, or something like that. And I think I surprisingly did a lot of good, things the right way, and a lot of things, oh, I wish I could go back and not waste my time or not waste my money on that. You're never gonna get it right. It's never gonna be perfect. So you really just have to create a strong foundation, a financial foundation first, quite honestly. I see a lot of people, there's so many like business coaches or people selling a course online you got to be very careful of, because you really don't know, are they legit, are they not? Talking about how easy it is to start a small business XYZ. But at the end of the day, it's your career and it's your money and it's your future. So you really got to set yourself up for success, and doing that, I would say make sure that you have a plan in place and you've got a significant financial cushion before you quit your 9 to 5, your kind of stable income, because it is a really scary transition from, oh, I am the one that is, responsible for this, and having maybe an exit strategy if it doesn't work out. I know lots of people that have tried and they realized, oh, actually, I don't like doing it. I actually love doing it as a hobby or something part time. I hate doing it full time. This isn't for me. And so having some sort of mechanism, so maybe within the first year, and honestly, that first year, you're going to know whether you like it or not, to then get back into the traditional workforce and maybe find, or go back to school, or whatever the case is. So I'd say also trying to do the thing that you want to do, yeah, while you're still working. So don't just like, well, I really want to open up a bakery. I've never done that before, but I'm going to quit my job in marketing and give it a go. No, you should absolutely try that on the side first to, again, see if this is something that you actually want to put all the hours and effort into. Is this actually something that you want to do every day? Are you obsessed with it? You have to be kind of obsessed with the idea that you have. And is this, yeah, realistic? I mean, just the bakery idea. I was talking to a friend I used to work with, and she made my wedding cake. She was incredible. She was doing that on the side while we're working at this newspaper. And then she realized, yeah, I don't know why I'm working this newspaper. This is not my thing at all. Why am I not doing the baking thing? And now she works at a company now, but she did freelance for a little bit and she loves it. But it is hard. She's like, it's not as glamorous as you see in the movies. We get up early. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of business stuff that isn't just like having fun making cupcakes or anything like that. So you really got to know what you're getting into before you do. And then I'd also say, I think that really helped me, especially since I run my business from home online. It can be kind of isolating. So finding those kind of communities where they don't have to be in the same, industry as you, but finding other, small business owners, entrepreneurs that you can get together with, whether that's in person or online, that you can share ideas with. Was this one mastermind I've been part of. I used to go to this financial conference and made a lot of friends and have kept in touch with a lot of them over the past decade, which is kind of crazy. And this one mastermind I've been part of for probably 5 years. And it's one you can, pop in or pop out. And we just get together and just talk about, so what's going on? Do you have any, things you need help with? Do you just want to kind of bounce ideas off of? And it's really nice. And we are all from, I think I'm the only Canadian, everyone else is from the States. We're all from different parts of North America, but we can all connect on the one thing and feel like less lonely and feel like, oh, you feel like you've got support somehow because you've got people that you can, talk to about those things. So really having that support system is essential.
Yeah, it really is because, like you say, it can be isolating. A lot of people are working from their homes
Yeah.
and they may not have friends or family in their immediate circle that are trying something a bit
Or
different.
yeah, know what the hell you're doing. Like most people in my, regular friend groups, they sort of know what I do, but not really. And I'm like, I get it. It's kind of hard to describe. It's not a traditional job. I made it up, you know? So finding people that can understand what you're doing, or at least understand some of the things that you have to go through as a small business owner is so helpful, so important.
And where do you see your career and life going over like the next 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I've been thinking a lot about. I'm approaching 40 next year, and so I feel like that's a big, kind of, you know, fork in the road a little bit to be like, where do we want to go? Because I definitely had once I was 30, and that's when I quit my job and became self-employed. I had a pretty much, a relatively comprehensive 10-year plan. And some things didn't go my way, some things did, and I hit a lot of my milestones. I'd say almost all of them, which is great. But then you're at the point where you're like, oh, now what do I do? So I don't know if I have an answer for you because it's really difficult to say. I have no idea. And also just the landscape has changed so much. And being like an online entrepreneur, content creator, it's so different than where I started. So part of it is like, I just hope I can kind of keep up and know what's next and not be left behind. But also, yeah, what new things do I want to do? I definitely have another book idea. So I realized, oh, writing books, so much fun. Would love to do that again. And, continuing the podcast, but evolving it a little bit. So trying to see where we want to take it after 10 years. And I think really focusing on YouTube a little bit more because, again, from my filmmaking background, it is one of those things you're like, oh, yeah, no, we know what we're doing here. And this is a lot of fun. I just haven't really given it the energy that I think it deserves. But I mean, ultimately, I'll hopefully still just be a financial educator. I don't know what that could look like, but I want to always, yeah, help people with their finances in some respect until, I mean, I can't anymore. But even when I think about like retirement, I still hope I get to do this because this is my dream. This is so much fun. I love what I do every day.
And was there anything that you think would be really important for listeners to know about or hear about that I didn't ask?
Oh, great question. I'd say the one really interesting thing of this whole experience for me releasing a book that was about a kind of a different topic than I think most people expected. And also, I had to go through a lot. I did a lot of therapy, I had a lot of personal experiences I shared in the book, and I had to be very vulnerable. Is just how life changing or how you can change the trajectory of your life if you just get to know yourself more. And the money part is actually the easiest part. It seems like it's the hardest part. I promise you it's not. I promise you it's not. It's actually pretty annoyingly simple. So the hard part is getting to know you, your past, outlining your future and being vulnerable with yourself, which is probably the hardest part. Especially coming from someone who had a very difficult time and still do being vulnerable because of all the fears of like, judgment or failure and all those kinds of things. But it can be the best thing that you ever did for yourself. And don't wait for the perfect time to get started. It's the perfect time is always like the day that you have that thought, I should do something about it. So set an intention and do it and really stay focused on that. Don't, there's a lot of distractors out there, so find a way to really stay focused and just do it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And it impacts all aspects of your life, right? Like you may have gone
Hmm.
into this looking to work on money beliefs, but
Yeah.
it can help all aspects of your life.
It's gonna, yeah, you're gonna probably be surprised, and I talk a lot about this in the book. My intention writing the book was I was gonna do a few sessions of different forms of therapy just so I could do research and understand them better and describe them. Did not realize that actually I needed that therapy for me. And I did a lot more introspection and personal growth than I ever could have thought. And so it opened aspects of me that I didn't even know were there. And because of that, even though again, I was just thinking I'm just going to improve my financial relationship, it improved my personal relationships as well because I didn't realize some of the things from my past was impacting more than just my money. And so it's going to be really interesting, I think, for you to, check out the book, maybe try out some different forms of therapy and see what you discover. And it's always going to be more than you think. It's always going to be like, oh, didn't know we were going to go there, but that might be where you need to go.
Yeah, because a lot of the time, the things that you have to work on, we're not conscious of
No,
initially. So it has
no,
to come up in the process. Can you let
exactly.
people know where they can find the book and where they can find your podcast? Like, can you just remind people
Yes.
what they're all called? And in case people don't look at the show notes, like what your website and socials
Mhm.
are.
Absolutely. So the book is called Everything But Money, The Hidden Barriers Between You and Financial Freedom. You can get it from any book retailer, but you can find more information if you just want some quick links at jessicamoorhouse.com/book. My podcast is called The More Money Podcast. So there's hundreds of episodes because it's been around for a decade. So there's pretty much an episode on anything you can think of. But we do actually, the past couple seasons for sure, have been a little more slanted towards topics from my, more the mindfulness, psychology, behavior kind of aspects of money, which is really fun. And my website is jessicamoorhouse.com. You can find me on Instagram at Jessica I. Moorhouse. You can find me on YouTube at Jessica Moorhouse, I think, or just Google Jessica Moorhouse and I'll pop right up. Quite honestly, that's probably the easiest way to find me. Google my name. I'm right there, I promise.
Well, we'll put all those in the show notes anyways for people if they are looking there, but it's just always handy to
Yeah.
list them out just in case people don't look there if they're driving. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing this information and for writing this book. I really got a lot of value out of it.
I mean, that means a lot coming from a psychologist because I am not a psychologist. So I was really honestly, one of my things while writing, I'm like, oh gosh, what if some, the therapist, the psychologist are reading, they're like, I don't know about that. I'm like, I made sure I did so much research. As you probably can tell from like the back of the book, there's all of those end notes to be like, here's references for everything. So it means a lot that you really liked it. That's really special.
No, it was great. And I appreciate the notes at the end because I've
There's
written a few books and I find you can't have enough references. People like
yeah.
those.
Yeah, no.
Well, thank you very much.